Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Horsepower Obsessed. Thanks for pressing play. Today, we're going to be talking about the C8 Corvette ZR1 and everything we know so far about this upcoming performance variant. Let's jump right into it. All right, guys. So like I said there in the beginning, we are talking about the ZR1 in this 8th generation Corvette lineup. And there's a lot to discuss here because there is a lot that we do have a pretty good understanding of. And we're going to talk about all of it today. So for those of you who don't know, the C8 Corvette ZR1 was recently spy shotted. And of course, it was wearing some seriously heavy camo. So we don't know exactly what this car is going to look like, but we do know that it is going to be the next performance variant in the C8 Corvette lineup. And you can tell even underneath all of the camo that it's wearing that it is in fact a different car than the Z06. It has a much more aggressive front bumper with a splitter that sticks out a good bit further than the front bumper to give it a kind of a raked appearance in the front. Now, this is very similar, very reminiscent of the C7 ZR1 compared to the C7 Z06. One of the biggest difference in the front, of course, was a much bigger splitter to give even more downforce to the front end of that car. And it looks like the 8th generation Corvette is going to take that a step further and make it even bigger because this thing just looks like it is a plow truck with a giant scoop on the front of this thing. Now, it looks really awesome. Even underneath that camo, I can tell that this car is going to be absolutely stunning looking. Now, again, under the camo, you can clearly see that the front end is going to be probably even more opened up than on the Z06 to allow additional cooling and, again, additional aero. There is some speculation that the hood of this car will allow a pass-through, again, giving it more aero and better downforce on the front end. So the air would come in through the front bumper and out over the top of the hood to push down that front end again. We have recently seen a leak of the wheel design for the C8 Corvette ZR1, and they look like they're pretty awesome looking as well. Chevy really has upped their game with the wheel options since the base Stingray options not being that great. Hey guys, I wanted to really quick mention ProClip as the sponsor of today's video. Whether you have a C6, a C7, or a C8 Corvette, ProClip makes the mount that you're going to want for your car. It's an extremely easy to install system that does not require any kind of permanent modification, and it can be removed as easily as it is installed. It is a two-part system, meaning that it will have just the arm for the C8 Corvette that wraps around the back of the infotainment system, and then you will choose whichever mount best fits your phone to go on the front. The best part, you can actually save 10% just by using the code HPO10 and following the link in the description down below. Around the back, it does look like we are going to continue to get our center exit exhaust tailpipes for the ZR1 as well. There is a very good chance that the engine in this car is very similar to the C8 Corvette Z06 engine, possibly twin turbocharged or even hybrid assisted to some degree to up the horsepower from the typical 670 that the C8 Corvette Z06 has to something closer to the 850 horsepower mark. Now, if you guys remember, in the very beginning, before any of the C8 Corvette information was solidified, we actually had a leak showing us what the performance variants were going to do in the future. Now, this started off with a 2022 C8 Corvette Z06. Obviously, this ended up being a 2023, but the numbers were pretty close. It said 650 horsepower, it ended up being 670, and it said 600 pound-feet of torque, which ended up being significantly lower at 470. So this is not to be looked at as an exact timeline or an exact numbers for these performance variants, but they're pretty close. Now, the part that really gets me is that they claim in 2023 we were going to get a Grand Sport. I'm still on the side that we're probably never going to see a Grand Sport, but it is possible. They claim that the Grand Sport was going to be 600 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. But again, if you look at the top, the power and the torque are both parenthesized with estimates. So this is just where they wanted to land or somewhere near these numbers. Odds are very good this was a roadmap put out before Chevy even really started production of these cars. They just wanted to have a general idea of where they were going to land with these things. And they're pretty close. This particular roadmap shows that the next car we're getting is actually the Grand Sport. I don't think that that's going to be the case here. It does look like this is going to end up being the Corvette ZR1, and it is very likely to mimic a lot of the Z06 aspects, especially the engine with possibly a hybrid assist or some sort of variation of the engine with a twin turbo setup. Like I said, as the Z06 engine sits right now, taking that and putting it into a car with twin turbos is not a great idea considering how high of a compression that engine already runs. So if this ends up being the case, it will be a fairly modified version of that 5.5 liter V8. Either way, it is going to be in the 800 horsepower range and likely very high 7s to low 8s in the pound-feet of torque, which is going to be an absolute monster no matter how you cut it. Now, obviously, after the ZR1, we're looking at the Corvette Zora, and this is likely to be something that is much more hybrid-assisted, possibly fully electric. Of course, it doesn't show that here on the roadmap, but just the way the world is going currently, I do feel like there is a good chance this car ends up being fully electric, or at least a lot more dependent on the hybrid side than the gas engine-powered side. But anyway, guys, this video is about what we know on the ZR1. So as of right now, we are looking at 800 horsepower and somewhere around 800 pound-feet of torque, and that is a pretty impressive feat for a car that is likely to remain the same size, same weight as the C8 Corvette Z06. So all you're really doing is adding more power and more aero. The big thing we can really depend on for the C8 Corvette ZR1 is going to be aero. They are really going to just knock it out of the park with the aero on this car because the ZR1 always steps up the aero game from the Z06. And you can tell that, again, from those photos that were spy shotted recently. You can clearly see the front splitter is going to be much more massive than the Z06 splitter. In the rear, we still are showing the Z07 style spoiler, but if I had to guess, that will end up getting changed as well to something that is more reminiscent of the C7 ZR1. That big wing adding almost 1,000 pounds of downforce to that particular car is very likely to be something that we see on the C8 ZR1 as well. Possibly something a little reminiscent of the C8R that we see on the actual racetracks with that big wing to add that extra downforce alongside that front splitter to add even more downforce. We could be looking at over 1,000 pounds of downforce at speed, which is pretty freaking crazy. There has been rumors of active aero on the C8 Corvette since the Stingray, and odds are very good GM is going to use active aero at some point in this lineup, and why not with the ZR1? The ZR1 is already known for its extra aero. Why not add it to a car that is going to hugely benefit from it? I think we are going to see the introduction of active aero on the ZR1 with a more widely adopted option on the upcoming Zora performance model. So with the ZR1, we could potentially see an active wing, given the fact that this car is likely to have a pretty nice sized wing on the back. And then with the Zora, we could potentially see an active splitter in the front and possibly an active wing in the rear as well. But either way, odds are very good we're going to see active aero on the ZR1 just because GM has filed massive amounts of patents for specifically active aero on the C8 Corvette. We have been talking about these patents since the inception of the Stingray, and of course, there's really not a good reason for GM to continue to file these patents unless they do plan on using them at some point. And again, I think that we are going to see them on the ZR1 since it is kind of the aero king. From the leaked rumors we got to see in the very beginning, the Corvette ZR1 is speculated to come in 2024. Of course, that is not going to happen at this point. It is going to be a 2025 or possibly even a 2026 at this point. It is shown to be the LT7 engine, 5.5 liter twin turbo dual overhead cam. So it sounds like from the leaks, it is going to be the same engine out of the Z06 with twin turbo setup. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about why I don't think that that's going to be exactly the case. And honestly, there's not even a guarantee that this engine will be twin turbocharged. If I had to guess, the easiest way for GM to do this would be to use the exact engine out of the Z06 with the hybrid assist part from the E-Ray to give it the extra power. Now, of course, both of these things could be tweaked a little bit to hit that 850 or 800-ish horsepower range, but you don't really have to tweak it that much to get to that point. So it does make sense. You throw in the hybrid motor to give it all-wheel drive, or even if you want to refrain from the all-wheel drive aspect, they can put that hybrid motor in and have it focus on the rear wheels only, along with that flat plane crank from the C8 Corvette Z06. That is an option, as well as the fact that they take the flat plane crank, modify it to some degree, and throw twin turbos at it to follow closer this leaked performance variant lineup. Either way, you're looking at a car that is going to perform quite well. There are some leaks online from the website topspeed.com that shows that the ZR1 Corvette will still be rear-wheel drive only, while the Zora will likely be all-wheel drive, just like the upcoming E-Ray. Now, it is possible with what I just said about the engines being flip-flop, and the C8 Corvette ZR1 gets the twin turbo setup, while the Zora gets the flat plane crank with a hybrid assist motor tweaked to some degree to give it the 1,000 horsepower. There's not much known at this point about the Zora, but with the ZR1, I think one of those two options is very likely going to be our case here. Either way, I said it a couple times now, 800 horsepower and a C8 is going to be freaking awesome. You add that 800 horsepower in with the aero that we are very likely to get, active aero on top of that, and this car is going to be an absolute track monster. Again, from the spy shot images that we recently got, the car does not look like it's going to be massively different in its exterior form. And of course, the C8 Corvette Z06 did tweak a couple things here and there to make the car look a lot different, while obviously maintaining that very, very familiar C8 Corvette Stingray look. So I would expect the same kind of thing out of the ZR1. We'll get a couple tweaks here and there that make it its own car, but it will look very similar to the C8 Z06 at the end of the day. The top dog ZR1 ZTK performance package is very likely to have that C8R big wing style look. And like I said, very possible that it will be active aero. But anyway, guys, that is basically what we know about this car so far, and what we are very likely to see very soon from GM as an official announcement. Now, these cars have not been seen in very heavy form testing on the streets, so we are still at least a year out from hearing any serious, solid, concrete confirmation from GM about this car. Now, with that said, stay tuned, because we are going to be getting a massive amount of leaks in that year time frame, if I had to guess. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. So if you liked what you saw, please smash that thumbs up button. Let me know you're liking the content so we can keep creating this news for you. It helps the channel, and it helps get this stuff out to as many other Corvette enthusiasts as possible. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm going to have loads of content like this coming you're not going to want to miss. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next upload.